we discuss all the time amongst ourselves about what is regenerative real estate. Recently, I heard a beloved member, one of our change agents, Garrett Peterson, say that regenerative real estate is about personal transformation. And I really resonated with that because what we're trying to do is really holistic, and we are really getting to the root of our thinking process. And we have to transform ourselves in order to be able to help the world transform. Do you know what I mean? Like, as we do this work, we're all working to heal ourselves to some degree and be a better, as we say, steward, right? And I really do believe that.
Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast, a show about human environments and how they can be used as a force for good. Conversations that educate and inspire people looking for a different way to do real estate. I'm Neil Collins, and on the show today we have Izumi Tanaka, a change agent with Latitude Regenerative Real Estate, talking about her path into the real estate industry while searching for meaning, connection, and community. For those of us that were raised in the United States, we know all too well the archetypal stereotype of the rugged individualist. It's this story that says that we must pull ourselves up by our bootstraps until we can own a piece of the American dream. The house with a white picket fence in the suburban neighborhood. Fortunately, it seems like this story is changing. It seems like people are beginning to realize that the American dream, this American dream, is a mirage, or at best an unsustainable reality. For some people, it may be that they are realizing that the pinnacle of American striving is actually isolating and lonely. Maybe you feel this way too as you drive home from work into your garage, which opens onto your kitchen, never needing to see or talk to anyone else along the way. Now it seems like there's an emergence of people looking to live more multi-generationally or within a more community-oriented atmosphere. Meanwhile, there are the others that see the house with the picket fence as something completely unattainable altogether, as our economic system erodes affordability in many places. This reminds me of a quote that I'm sure you've heard of, but it's worth repeating. If you want to go fast, then go alone. But if you want to go far, then go together. It's this spirit that I've come to realize rings so true for me as we seek to birth this concept of regenerative real estate into the world. It takes others to join in and co-create with us, to lead, inspire, and add their own flavor to it. That's why I'm very excited to have Izumi join us on this episode. Izumi is a change agent with us and is a true spirit-led leader out of the Los Angeles area. Izumi originally grew up in Japan and had a creative career before getting into real estate, which is why it's so interesting to listen why she chose real estate sales as a profession in which she could not only make a livelihood, but also a difference in the world. Izumi talks about her background as well as how she incorporates a spirituality practice into her regenerative work. She is an advocate of deep green and is the host of a podcast called Home Green Homes. Her story is a great example of what it means to find community in order to do the work that is in integrity with your values and is needed in the world. This episode is near and dear to me, and it is a real treat to welcome Izumi onto the show. Everybody, welcome back to another show of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. I am just so pleased to have a fellow change agent, a friend and colleague, Izumi Tanaka, with us. Izumi, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time to join me.
It is an honor to be with you, Neil, for your
Yeah, this
invitation.
is a fun one because I usually don't get to do these shows with people that I know really well and that we've been working together for some time now. So it's great to have the rapport already built up. But what's really interesting to me is like you have this whole background that I actually don't know a lot about. And by anybody just like reading your name, it's a Japanese name. And I thought that would be a really fun part is like, can we dive into your story coming from your background and where you grew up and what that looks like?
Wow, what a question. Okay, sure. Well, I obviously grew up in Japan and I am from Yokohama. It's a city right south of Tokyo. And Yokohama is considered one of the largest cities in Japan. But when I grew up, when I was a child, it was still not as big. And the town that I grew up was actually by the beach. And this was right after the post-war industrialization period in Japan, that even though I was actually quote unquote born by the beach, by the time I was going to preschool, it was already built up. So I don't actually remember being by the beach. And as I grew up, there were a lot of still empty fields and some hills. And I did spend a lot of time outside playing, climbing trees. I was digging dirt. I was catching insects. And so I was exposed to a lot of that. I grew up picking some grass to make certain kind of Japanese sweets. And now that I look back, it was a very regenerative lifestyle. Everything was local. I remember having tofu vendors coming through the streets with a particular sound of horn, and they'll be riding bicycles with a little bucket in the back, and that's how we bought tofus. And we had local farmers who would come every week or so to bring their crops, and that's how we lived. And before I knew, it became a big city, and now I go back, I can't even recognize it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's one of these places that I haven't been, but my partner Alyssa, for those
Yeah.
of you tuning into the show, she spent quite a bit of time in Japan.
Mm.
And it really seems like Japan has a culture that is so different than the US in my context, where maybe I'm just fantasizing this, but it seems like there's more of a reverence for craftsmanship and for
hmm
heritage and tradition. And I'm wondering if you see that still in modern day Japan.
I think that the culture and traditions are still very much alive, although the type of culture and traditions that you're probably thinking about, they are there, but there's all kinds of newer, modern culture and trends are also available. So it might be either diluted or buried, or it's not. There's just so many more shapes and flavors of Japanese cultures and traditions that are present today. And I'm sure that there's a strong movement of preserving the real traditions and cultures. I see that there are a lot of, what should I say, books, shows, art that are more looking towards the past and integrating that into the contemporary world. It's quite fascinating, but I haven't been really spending a lot of time in Japan in recent years, so I'm probably missing a lot.
And why I think that the Japanese culture piece really intrigues me is like whenever I was first introduced to the concept of an ikigai,
Mm,
I became pretty enraptured in this concept of find the center of a Venn diagram of what your skills are, what your passion is, and what the world needs. And
mm,
I've read that we've in the Western cultures have added on and what you can be remunerated for. Whereas, this is a Japanese concept, and I can find examples of this is a really fascinating one. The oldest hotel in the world has been owned by a single family since like the year 780.
Oh,
And
wow.
then you look at Japanese real estate now, where I read about how houses are built to last 30 years and not much longer. And so it's this really interesting juxtaposition of like, how does culture meet place and meet the built environment? And vocation is such a big thing for me. Is like, how do you even go about kind of reconciling the past with the future in a place that like anywhere, Japan has been evolving naturally with over time. And I think it's so interesting that this is the culture that you're coming out of.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you came up with that word ikigai. And I don't think I can really speak intelligently about the aspect of like real estate and the culture in Japan. But I can say that the concept of ikigai is something that I believe that's been kind of a driving force for me, at least through my career, as I seek whatever my career path would be. And it was ikigai to me means just being meaningful, doing something meaningful that I can feel content in my own contribution to the world. And that has been the driving force in my life. However, the meandering career path that I have traveled through all my years.
Let's start with what that originally looked like. What were you really called to from a young age?
Interesting. Well, I would say that I was about 7. There was a show on Japanese TV where this woman travels all over the world and she would go meet with people, and she went everywhere. She went anywhere from big cities to Africa and everything in between. And I saw that she was speaking English and she was able to communicate with the people around the world. And from that point on, I had determined that I needed to speak English to be able to communicate and to connect with all kinds of different people. So I had a lot of different interests throughout my growing up years, but I was always really industriously, diligently studying English. So the first few years of being here in United States, I came when I was 21. So it's more than 40 years ago. So the first few years were basically really about me trying to interestingly, assimilate into this so-called American culture and speak the language, English, and be able to communicate my thoughts and feelings in English. And that was what drove me for the first few years. But then I think I started this self-discovery journey, after a few years. For some reason, English helped me to access that. I think the Japanese language is very kind of elusive and it doesn't have a lot of mechanism of expressing your feelings. It has its own beauty, but I think for me it helped me to have the language, English language, to be able to explore my inner world and be able to express myself.
Can you give more context to that self-discovery process? Like, what was your entry point there?
I think that the entry point was I took some history class in college, UCLA. I took Japanese history class, I think, first. And Learned a lot of things that I didn't study in Japanese schools about Japanese, the country, Japan. And I also took some language classes. I was a Spanish major, believe it or not. And and then um, and then I started teaching Japanese to American students. And I started to realize my language and my background is so deep than what I had understood myself to be a part of. And that's when I started thinking, oh wow, who am I? How am I in this life, living in the America, having all the cultural background, and how am I to express myself in this world as somebody who basically immigrated from Japan, and that kind of made me look at what my inner workings are.
How did that catalyze in maybe your professional self? Did you begin a new career or a shift in what you were doing?
You know what? In terms of career, we were talking about ikigai earlier. I always knew that I wanted to do something that was meaningful. I always knew that I wanted to work in a field that I know that I can make a difference, some kind of difference. I don't know what, in what form. And so while I was studying in college, I was just one thing led to the other. I was basically following the breadcrumbs, whatever showed up. I didn't have any long term career goals or long term academic goals. I just kind of started taking classes at community college without thinking that I was going to even go to college. And then angels show up and say, I think you should go to college. And then I said, oh, okay. That I would apply for college. And so I've always kind of walked my path like that without having a longer goal or longer plan. And so as I was doing that, I was led to working in television. And then I was introduced to a certain people, and then they saw that I had the skill and ability, and it led me to work in productions, making documentaries. And along the way, I was always aware that, okay, yeah, this is good. I can do this. This is a field that I can make a difference, through storytelling. And obviously, in the earlier years, it was somebody else's project, but I could be a part of the storytelling. And through that, I would meet really interesting people, really interesting stories, and that would all enrich me in terms of my own self discovery journey.
Bring us from the documentary filmmaking world
Mm-hmm.
into the real estate world. Help us bridge that gap because I know that that's where we're ultimately going.
I know. Well, it could be a long story. So, like I said, for the most part of my career, I was making documentaries, and most of them were small scale projects. But then I made my own story. I made up my own film. Actually, I did a lot of production in Alaska, where Alyssa comes from. And it took me 9 years to finish that film. And when I was done with that, I didn't know where I was going. I knew that documentary production wasn't necessarily sustainable financially. So I looked at all the skill set I have, and I decided that I would be a photographer. And so I became a photographer. Although I was always a photographer, I just decided that, okay, I'm just going to be a professional photographer one day. And I don't have any formal training. I just been shooting all my life. And so it turns out that I found a knack in shooting architectural and interiors. And so I did that for a while. And one of my clients was now Premier Prefab Company. And they hired me on several occasions, and I got to learn what they're doing. And this company was one of the first prefab manufacturer or builder that was doing all sustainable designs. So I got to discover that there's such thing as sustainable. And then I was doing photography for several years, but it came to a point where it was no longer sustainable financially. And by then, I had been working with my husband, who had been a real estate agent for, at that point, probably more than 15 years. And I started helping him a lot on the back end. And when my photography business was no longer sustainable, I decided, okay, I got to do something. And getting licensed as a realtor seemed to be the next right thing. So I got licensed. But from the get-go, I knew that I didn't want to be just another real estate agent in Los Angeles. There's millions of them. And I wasn't interested in definitely chasing numbers, but I didn't know how I could do it. But I had that seed planted when I was shooting for this prefab company that there's such thing as sustainable building. And then I discovered that there's a thing called green designation. So I got the designation, and I thought I have the ticket to be a successful green agent. But it wasn't that easy. So that's how I ended up in real estate.
That's a
And
great spot to pick up.
yeah.
And for the people that are listening, NAR Green is the National Association of Realtors Green Designee Program. And I'm curious, like that, what a really great entry point from learning about sustainability from a client that's not even involved in the transactional side. But what did you learn through the Green Designee Program, and how did that either enable you to go down the path of impactful and mindful real estate, or did you feel like that equipped you with the tools that you needed to succeed in that space?
Well, non-green course was very basic. It definitely gave me really good foundation about how green realtors should be operating. And it gave me some verbiage that I can use, but I still didn't know much. I'm not a scientific person. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a builder. I'm not a scientist. And I really don't understand a lot of the building science. So what that did to me was that I realized that, okay, I need to learn so much more. The non-green course gave me a foundation, but it just wasn't enough for me if I wanted to really be a green expert, because I thought that I wanted to be a go-to person if anybody wanted to know anything about green real estate, right? So I wanted to be an expert, and I was far from being an expert. So what I decided to do was, okay, I'm just going to start a podcast, and I'm just going to start talking to people that I want to learn from. That's how I started my podcast. And I just love the fact that I can reach out to people and say, hi, can I talk to you on my podcast? And it's been really wonderful tool for me to be able to build what you and I call ecosystem partner, and I learned from them a lot, and it's been really enjoyable.
And I guess the best point into that is because you sought out experts in the field and you were really attracted towards green real estate, that is much more of a values-driven approach. What did you find that maybe confirmed this is what green real estate is, and this is why I love it, and this is what I want to practice? Or maybe an area that was unexpected, that has either expanded or contracted just how you conceive of the real estate space and in the built environment?
Well, let's see. The most unexpected was that it was so much deeper and more complex than I expected. I don't actually know what I expected, But once I started learning, there was just so much more to learn. And it's so complex, the whole, not just the real estate business part, but also, how everything works, who's building and who is living in what kind of places and who's working in that field. And there, it's very expensive, I have to say. And, I really feel like I just touched the tip of the iceberg, even today. But then one day I get a message from something called Latitude Regenerative Real Estate. And I'm like, what is Latitude? And what is regenerative real estate? And once I got to your website, I was like, wow, this is even deeper, so much deeper. And it was like I had chills all over my body. And I said, I didn't know there were other people who are trying to do this. And it really changed my life, I have to say.
It's funny because I'm remembering that conversation with you about just the impression upon what we were doing and like catching you in this moment of time where I was going through a very similar thing. And I know Alyssa was as well, as like really looking for our community of people that saw real estate as an opportunity for something different. And even to this day, trying to put words to what is regenerative real estate. Like some people want such a crystalline and concrete thing, where I'm curious to hear your perspective on like if you see a difference between green real estate and regenerative real estate. How do these terms relate or diverge for you?
I don't think it's either relate or diverge. It's more like merge, because for me, when I was doing home green homes and I was trying to do everything around green properties, green real estate, green way of living, all of that. But when I discovered you guys, and when I discovered this concept of regenerative real estate, it was like, wow, it's so much more, so much deeper, but it contains everything. And I learned so much from you guys. And you guys has given me new language, new perspective, but it doesn't necessarily negate all the green, so-called green. And I do think that there's definitely some greenwashing happening out there and that we have to be really careful, mindful about. But I think regenerative real estate is really more expansive and more inclusive of everything that we are trying to do. And that's what I love about it. And we discuss all the time amongst ourselves about what is regenerative real estate. Recently, I heard a beloved member, one of our change agents, Garrett Peterson, say that regenerative real estate is about personal transformation. And I really resonated with that because what we are trying to do is really holistic, and we are really getting to the root of our thinking process. And we have to transform ourselves in order to be able to help the world transform. Do you know what I mean? Like, as we do this work, we're all working to heal ourselves to some degree and be a better, as we say, steward, right? And I really do believe that. And I will say that since I joined Latitude, I am changing. I'm changing little by little in the way that I am making my life more regenerative myself. Like composting. And I started growing microgreens, things like that. And it's so small actions, but I have been changing. And I think that's really important that all of us are doing our own personal work internally so that we can be of better service in the world.
I so beautifully said, and I see you truly as a leader within the regenerative real estate community and movement, especially as it relates to mindfulness.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if that's your upbringing or if that's something that you've cultivated a practice over time. And maybe this is a really fun opportunity to jump into. I know that you've been pursuing an eco chaplaincy. Is it a designation or is it like let's go into through that entry point of like the mindfulness piece around how we are inhabiting the planet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that question. So, first of all, I can't attribute my mindfulness practice to my upbringing. I'm sure that there are some cultural elements. I grew up in the Buddhist country, so I'm sure that there's a lot of concepts that have been infused in me just by growing up in that country. But I have been practicing a Buddhist meditation called Vipassana. And Vipassana it's been almost 25 years since I started practicing that. And Vipassana is the foundation, the basis of now mainstream mindfulness. And so in the last 25 years that I've been practicing that, I cultivated that more and more. And I always trying to integrate that in my work world, right? Work life. And I took a course called Buddhist Eco Chaplaincy Program last year. And basically, what eco chaplaincy is, as like a chaplain is a spiritual guide, a spiritual support, and that's their job. So, eco chaplain is somebody who might help people or thing who might be affected by the environmental issues. So it could be some kind of a workshop, or it could be a one-on-one counseling, or it could be facilitating some kind of ceremonies, or I don't know, it could be anything. And it's a new concept also. It's kind of nascent, just like regenerative real estate, right? So the way that I took it in the course is that it bridged my real estate business and with my spiritual practice. And Latitude and eco chaplaincy was the perfect connection for me. It's really wonderful because Buddhist teaching is based on the Four Noble Truths. So, number one is that there is suffering. There tend to be sufferings in the world. We all tend to experience some kind of discontent, dissatisfaction. And number two is there is a cause for these sufferings. And I'm not going to get into that Buddhist teaching part, but there is a cause in suffering. And number three is that it's possible to cease that suffering. And number four is there is a path to do this, to get to the cessation of suffering. And what I saw when I found you guys, Latitude, is that you guys are practicing that we recognize that there is this big, huge problem in the world that's causing a lot of sufferings in many ways. And you guys recognize that there are causes, like we humans are the ones that are causing this problem. And you guys see that there are ways, that there are solutions that we can do to change that, to end that. And that's the regenerative real estate practice that we are doing. So I'm just getting chills just talking about it. And it's called Buddhist eco chaplaincy, but I just totally believe that every one of us in Latitude are eco chaplains. We are just using the vehicle of real estate business.
The words of gratitude come to mind right now, and I also want to take people on this learning journey that we've gone on as a community to really give structure towards the roots of regeneration. Mm-hmm. And we came up with these five roots: health and wellness, sustainability, ecology, community, And the last one that we're really hitting on that I will totally give credence to you to help craft this and define it on so many different levels is spirit. And it's funny because we were really trying to get our arms around, like, is this spirituality? Is this the spirit of home, the spirit of place? And there's so many different levels to that of just like truly the essence of regeneration for me is this reciprocal relationship, living in reciprocity with humans in place, and how that shows up. And I'm curious from like that very deep eco-chaplaincy level up to working with buyers and sellers in a very transactional oriented industry, how you start to incorporate that into your business every single day.
Wow. I wish I had a perfect answer for that. And real estate business can get really intense. You and I know that it could be very stressful. We could lose sleep. We could get completely agitated. And I didn't want to have my work to be all that, by just chasing numbers. And I wanted to be a storyteller about the places, right? So my desire and aspiration is to be able to help tell stories for either sellers or buyers or anybody who might be interested in creating something that is truly reciprocal and regenerative. And it's a tall order, I think. But I want to say that it's really interesting that how you said about the spirit, because it comes back to the Japanese tradition or custom or beliefs that there's another religion in Japan called Shinto, and Shinto really believes that there is spirit in places, and they do ceremonies, and we have a lot of rites of passage in Shinto, and that's reciprocating with the nature. So it's kind of closing the circle for me with this conversation, interestingly.
One of the really fun things watching you on your journey towards field building is what I see you doing really well in not only the Los Angeles region where you are, but you have this national reach. And I'm curious if you're going down a similar or parallel path that I am, talking to these incredible people. And for me, it starts to hit home that we're all designers. Some of us don't realize that we're designers, but we have designed the world that we have inherited. And I'm curious if you see that within the inspiration that you're getting talking on your podcast with truly world-renowned designers and architects to how they're starting to incorporate this and like how you're starting to see the world react to, like, do you see people getting agency and creating more, I don't know, mindful spaces, sacred spaces? Do you see any light getting shown on how people are conceiving of place?
Yes, I do believe that's happening, although it's still very dim. Maybe it's a little getting brighter, every day, because I am within this community. I'm amongst you, Neil, Alyssa, Mark, Garrett, Daniel, everybody. And it's easy to see that light when I am with you. But sometimes when I'm out and about, especially Los Angeles, it's a big city. When I go down to 405, it's the San Diego freeway, where there's 7 lanes of highway, one direction, packed, right? Sometimes I just go, I don't know. But then you're right, by reaching out to all these different people who are in the field of doing this, whether that you call it green or sustainable or regenerative, there are so many people out there who are really interested, who really care to do something. And I am really nourished by all the connections I'm making through Latitude, through all the other efforts that I'm making. So, yes, definitely. And we got to do more.
There's
There's a lot
a
more work to do.
podcast by a lady named Vicki Robbins, who is a prolific systems thinker. But she's got a podcast that's sponsored by the Post Carbon Institute. And I love the name. And it's almost the most beautiful format to a podcast because she asks one question pretty much, which is what could possibly go right?
That's right.
And I'd love to ask you that question. What do you think could possibly go right from here? And your perspective living in such the quintessential metropolis of LA that there are problems upon problems. It's packed, it's hot, that's paved over, there's water issues. That is the epicenter of what we're really talking about, of the transformation we're seeking. But what do you think could possibly go right with your vantage point right now?
What could possibly go right is, or maybe already going right, is that there are people out there who I am seeking out, or people are seeking me out. There is enough people who are really trying to do something. And I think the momentum is there. So I think the momentum is picking up. And so I do believe that it's possible to have some massive impact, even in a big city like LA. I'm a part of USGBC LA, and I am chairing a new committee called Green Home Committee. And we are trying to come up with a platform where we can provide resources to homeowners, builders, developers, architects, and real estate agents so that we can all have access to information and tools and different types of resources. So there is a movement. And I think it can totally go right. And, it'll just take a little bit of time and energy, but I think it's entirely possible that we can start making some really strong, positive changes.
What do you think about real estate professionals and the profession itself? Do you think that this is going to be a momentous time that we're going to start to see more people create a regenerative vocation? Or do you think that the grips of the transactional industry is too strong?
Honestly, in big cities like LA, I don't know, maybe New York, it's my personal opinion that the drive for the more, the better, the bigger, the glitzier is definitely strong. I don't know that in the real estate profession, it would have much change coming soon. But there are people, like us, definitely. It's just that, in the big cities where median price of property is 1.5 million for a fixer, it's very tempting to just chase that kind of numbers. But for me, it's not regenerative. I want to have a balanced, healthy, mindful way of living. So I don't want to have to be driving around all over the place, burning gas and chasing clients. But, so there are a small portion of real estate agents who do care, but I don't know places like where you are. You probably have a little bit of different culture in the real estate professionals. But in big cities, I think it's still very much number game.
Yeah. And we'll probably never get away from that, right? Yeah. Especially as the real estate profession is this, I think the shiny object syndrome is for people to get into the profession of, there's no ceiling. I can make as much as I want with the entire marketing machine going towards self-development, net worth, production numbers, team count. That'll take a long time to
I think
work
so
with.
too.
And maybe we're not even trying to overthrow that.
No, that's their place. And I think we have a very meaningful place that we occupy in this profession. And I do see that it's going to grow. I mean, we already have grown in the last year that I've been with you. So it's not going to be, I don't know, it's not going to be like a major growth, but I think there's definitely enough people, but we will get quality. Do you know what I mean?
How do you hold the tension? And I'm just like, this is now going to be a really raw part of the segment of really trying to tell people some of the tension that does exist within the regenerative real estate space, that we get a lot of scrutiny of
Mm,
people saying, how are you calling this regenerative real estate if you're working in Los Angeles and you're selling a $1.6 million home when, the average American income is, a fraction of that, and they can't
mm-hmm.
afford a house like that. Or you've got concrete floors and that uses so much energy to create, like you can't
Right.
possibly call this regenerative. Like
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
your internal process or external to really hold the tension that exists there?
Well, I'm definitely holding the tension for sure. I don't know how I can describe that internal process. I do go through guilt, I go through shame, I go through hope. And as you say, especially in the big city like LA, and that's a big question for me. How do I practice regenerative real estate? It's much easier if I look at the places where I'm living, it's already very much regenerative to start with, where you can see the trees, you can see the sky. And whereas in Los Angeles, where the other day in a meeting, there was a big launch or unveiling of this new 40 million rooftop penthouse condominium that's on the market, where the developer held a very fancy reveal party. They invited like the top 20 real estate agents in town and had a 5-course dinner with champagne and everything. Whereas down the street in the same block, there are homeless people living in tents, you know, and I really don't know how to hold that. I don't have any solution that I can offer. I know that there's a lot of movements to tackle this homeless situations in LA and many other cities, but it's a big quagmire for me as well. And that's a pretty extreme example. But the last listing I sold, we listed for 1.8 and sold it for 2.2 million. And like you said, am I contributing to the inequity, social inequity, by being the agent to promote this property? But it just happened. I didn't say let's sell it for 2.2. It was that's how the buyers came. But again, like you said, not everybody can be in the game in Los Angeles real estate market. And I go, how does that happen? And is that where I want to be working? So that's an ongoing question for me. How do I practice regenerative real estate in an environment like that? So that this is going to be something that I will be processing with you guys all the coming days and weeks and months and years.
This is exactly why I think when we are trying to formulate what is Latitude, what is regenerative
Mm-hmm.
real estate, we have struggled of, is this a community? Is it a marketplace? Is it a media company? There's a lot of different faces to this work. But what gives me so much tenacity for this is that Latitude is a community of change agents, of people that are sitting in that complexity and holding that tension and saying there is an opportunity here, but it does come with a lot of heaviness. And there are 50 shades of gray in all of
Mm-hmm.
this. And so I
Mm-hmm.
see it as this wonderful community that has this spirit that enables us to resource ourselves.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that we're going to be working within a real estate industry that is fraught with inequity, fraught with extraction, and wave a magic wand to say, now it's ecologically rich, it is sustainable systems, it's affordable, it's rooted in place. Like there is so many different hurdles and facets to this that it really speaks back down towards that internal process that you're really talking about.
I agree. We all have to do our work in order to be able to find our path and, cultivate our path together.
In a way that is in service to life. And I think that's really the essence for me, is like, how do we start to do this in a way that enables evolution? And to do that is we need to start seeing ourselves in all of life as co-inhabitants.
Yeah. Oh, well, I have to say, I am so grateful for you and Alyssa for starting Latitude and giving us this incredible community where we really get to connect with each other, even though we're scattered all over the country. But I really do feel bonded with you guys. We get to see each other only twice a week on the Zoom meeting, but I'm really deeply grateful for you, Neil and Melissa, for creating this incredible space for us.
Oh, that is mutual, because I think for us, it's an example of the caliber of people that we're blessed to hold space with, and to really embody the spirit of co-creation, and to really develop these frameworks and methodologies in step with you. Let's not develop a model, let's develop a framework, and let's develop a field. And that's how not only we can put forth such a ambitious concept as regenerative real estate, but create a livelihood doing it.
Yeah.
And really, where I find a lot of tension right now in my life and my business is like working kind of at that brand level that Latitude is at, because we're now working in 10 different states, while also living in community and seeing like the real regenerative path is everybody, all these change agents working in their own communities, within their own context, and knowing what lights them up and what the potential as well as what the challenges are within each community, and how we can be change agents to unlock that potential. So it is a pleasure to do this work with you and co-create with you. And with that, Izumi, let's give a plug towards where people can find more about your work or connect with you. And how about we start with your podcast?
Okay, my podcast is called Home Green Homes. And I'm getting up to about 50 episodes at this point. And so I recently created a standalone website, where people can go and search by the topic. I have different topics from financing to solar panel to decarbonizing to interior design to landscaping. So at homegreenhomes.com, where you can see all the episodes.
And then do you have any other websites or plugs that you give?
Well, I can plug in my photography. I have a Izumi Tanaka photo. That's where you can see some of my architectural photography and my fine art photography and some of my documentary projects that I worked on. And then, of course, Latitude website that we just launched today.
Yes, a new facelift was sorely needed. And so I'm going to do the shameless plug for you. Look, if you're listening to this and you are in the LA area, or you've got friends and family in the Los Angeles area, and this is really kind of speaking towards you, please get in touch with Izumi, because she would be my go-to realtor if I was looking to move or to sell out of Los Angeles. So Izumi, thank you so much. This has been truly a pleasure and just a great way to spend the last hour.
Thank you so much, Neil. I think we're really onto something,
I think so too.
And I'm so excited.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the show today. If you want to follow our work at Latitude, you can follow us on Instagram at latitude.regenerative.re, and mine is at I am Neil Collins. We inherently believe in the potential that comes from connecting value-aligned and purpose-driven people together in community. That's why I encourage you to join our mighty network and introduce yourself to the other people working across the globe to advance a more regenerative, resilient, and beautiful world. Here, we want to know what you're working on and what inspires you. Through this platform, you can attend live events, take courses provided by our podcast guests, and create connection with other people and businesses that share your same passion. To join, find the link in our show notes or visit our website at chooselatitude.com. If you'd like to support the show, please share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on your podcast app so that you always have the latest episode downloaded. Another way to support our regenerative field building is to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Positive ratings help attract amazing guests, and they can be the deciding factor for someone else to tune in and listen. And who knows? Maybe this is the kind of motivation that it takes for them to finally decide to align their profession with their sustainable and regenerative values and become a positive force for good within their own community. This show was produced by myself and edited by Anthony Wallace and offered as a part of our work with Latitude Regenerative Real Estate.